Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Maverick, and right now we're going to be watching episode 6 of Vinland Saga. So, last episode, we saw a bit of Thorfinn's perseverance. He's definitely stubborn to a fault, and well, he managed to at least impress Askeladd enough that he at least got a promise out of him, right? So, as I remember it, Askeladd basically said, prove yourself on the battlefield first, become a warrior, and then once you prove yourself, I will grant you a duel again, right? Now, here, you could, because Askeladd, I already view him as very smart, right? This could go lots of different ways. Like, for one, he could just be thinking of using this to just get an annoying problem off his back, if you will, and maybe he has absolutely no expectation of Thorfinn actually surviving. That's entirely a possibility. Or maybe he does see, some greatness in him, and is just basically telling him to go onto the battlefield, and if you eventually prove yourself, then yeah, you prove yourself, and that would be good as well. Well, you can't really know right now, but in either way, in any case, it's like two birds with one stone, right? So, hey, again, pretty good thinking on his part. Now, for Thorfinn, now the question becomes, does he continue to follow Askeladd back to Norse, I guess, such as like Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and whatnot? He is stuck in England right now, right? Or is he just gonna continue to live on and be stuck in England, right? That would be kind of dramatic, don't you guys think? But then again, Thorfinn isn't actually acting in the most reasonable way so far, so that's entirely a possibility. Or I guess we could also see a direct time skip into when Thorfinn is a little bit older, right? Like I said before, I do expect this to be coming, judging on the opening of the anime, where we do see sort of like a time skip where he grows older and older, into eventually, I'm guessing, maybe around 15 years old, right? That seems around right for medieval times, when one would prove themselves on the battlefield. In any case, let's get into the episode right now, and we'll discuss more later. Alright, let's begin in 3, 2, 1, play. Like, they could always want to, forward time until more specific time periods, times in history, right? Such as, I guess you could say, the 3 invasions of England. Maybe those are the 3 different parts, because in the opening we see him change 3 times, so potentially there's a connection there. No, so he did follow them. He did follow them back on his ship. Okay. So he did take the reasonable way out. Okay, I can applaud that. I can applaud that. I mean, they're known as Vikings in contemporary times. They didn't really call themselves that, but okay. Right, the St. Brice's Day massacre. So it does begin the formal invasion led by Sweyn Forkbeard. Hmm? Okay. Anyways, let me skip this real quick. I'll see you guys in a second. Okay. The journey begins. Okay. Hmm. Does seem like the Norse there. Or it could be both, actually. First taste of the battle. Yeah, that's probably not something a 5-year-old should be seeing. Are the Vikings so... okay, never mind. Like I've explained before, Viking means in Norse to go on a raid, so they wouldn't call themselves Vikings. But, that's semantics. I mean, as far as I know, Askeladd is one of the Norse himself, right? So they wouldn't call themselves. Yeah, they're both Danes. So they're probably like army regulars and stuff. Whereas Askeladd is sort of like a rogue force. Well, he's a mercenary force anyway. Ambush? Really? Okay. So he's gonna try doing something. It's way too early, dude. What you gonna do? Saved, I guess? Ooh. I think he was also stabbed a little bit. Yeah, I believe he was stabbed a little bit as well, right? Oh no? Okay. Oh, nice. But that's probably not deep enough. Yeah. Ooh. Okay. Guess it doesn't matter if you hit, like, the heart or lung. Actually, that doesn't seem like the... Yeah. Isn't he wearing mail, though? Hmm. Oh. Don't tell me we're gonna time skip from here? Really? Okay, okay. Now that's more reasonable, right? He's wearing mail. There's no way that that short sword would be able to penetrate that. Nice. So he is fighting alongside Ashlad's men. Oof. Nice. Hmm. Oh, dang. Oh, right in the face. Damn. Again, though. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous that a small child wielding two short swords is off killing all these people. But it's awesome, right? So, whatever, whatever. We gotta have some artistic license here. He's talking about the English king, right? Yeah. I mean, oh wow, it's 1,000. This should be near to the end of the third invasion of England. They can't understand each other, right? I mean, they're Anglo-Saxons. He's one of the Norse. Can he? Okay, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Thank goodness. If they started conversing, I would be like, what the hell? Nice. Or fleas. So he got lost from Ashlad's forces while scouting. He can't understand. It's super confusing right now because they're basically using the same. Basically because he hates the current king. She hates the current king. Sure reminds me of Thorfinn's sister. is that a word you learned in English? John? Hmm. Oh, they're going to raid this village. But she's not running. In true Viking fashion. Well, he's chosen his path. Alright, alright. I get it, I get it. It's a sad story, but he's chosen. Okay, so that was episode 6, and let me start off this review section by, I guess, apologizing for calling out the anime for two different things which I later found out is not inaccurate at all. So, there are two things that I mentioned within this episode, one being the usage of the term Viking, and the other in terms of the, slaying of soldiers wearing chainmail, right? So, in terms of the former, so Viking, yeah, I know. In modern times, people just use Vikings to call the Norse people, the Scandinavian people, right? But especially in the context of this setting, again, I've explained from the very first episode, Viking is really more of a verb than a noun. So going on a Viking means going on a raid. And I guess you could theoretically also say that people who did this would be calling themselves Vikings, but that would just be a small a very, very small part of the entire Norse population, right? Most people did not go on raids and so on and so forth. Now, however, by looking at rewatching the episode and paying more attention to dialogue, I feel like they didn't actually use it in an accurate way, because they're specifically referring to the people who were invading England. And so, technically, anybody who is invading England during that time or raiding England would be a Viking, because there was no formal invasion as ordered by a king or whatnot, right? Before this particular part of Norse history, there wasn't really a unified king in regards to all the entirety of Denmark or Norway, Sweden, etc., etc. So any raiding parties that there were basically more localized, your local warlords, or yeah, so it wasn't really a formal invasion. It was more like raids. And so yeah, you could absolutely call all of those people who raided England at the time Vikings. That would actually be accurate. So in that term, I was wrong for calling them out on that part. They actually nailed that pretty correctly. And it's actually they do, the anime does make this distinction as well, right? Because later on we see the guy from Askeladd's right hand man. He's specifically saying, "Hey, you and me, we're both Dans, right?" So that is more in accordance to what they would be, from the Danish area. And of course, an interesting thing is where I believe he's part of the Jomsviking, the other guy. He said, "Don't group us together, we're not the same." I'm actually kind of curious what he specifically meant by that. Does he mean that because he's part of a military organization, the Jomsvikings, so he does not want to be, mentioned in the same thing as Askeladd and his men? Or does it mean that because he's actually working under a king now, he's part of the regular army, if you will, whereas Askeladd and his men are still mercenary Vikings, if you will. They do Vikings as well, and they also provide their services for a certain amount of fees. So maybe the distinction is there as well. But anyways, long story short, so they are using the term Viking correctly. So that is my mistake number one. And the second part is in regards to calling out the chainmail part, right? So again, initially within a lot of the action sequences here, I was like, wait, how are they slashing through chainmail? That is entirely not accurate, right? You can't slash through chainmail. Chainmail is very, very durable. You're not going to be able to pierce it through through slashes with your sword or whatnot. In fact, it's pretty hard to pierce through chainmail as well. Well, of course, it depends on the quality and whatnot, but I mean, here specifically, we saw them doing slashes and then lots of blood flying out everywhere, right? So I was a bit skeptical on that part as well. But then I rewatched the episode, and in slow motion, I watched all those scenes again, and it turns out that actually every single one of those scenes where they encounter someone wearing chainmail, they actually, target them in the neck area or the unprotected areas. They did not actually slice at the body, or etc., etc. So that part is also something that's very nice as well. In fact, the only ones where we are shown where they were sliced through the torso and whatnot were only people who were wearing some, honestly rather under armored for the battlefield, and not even wearing Amundsen or whatnot. Anyways, I did like that attention to detail as well, because it was moving so fast. I thought that they were slicing at the torsos. No, they were always slicing at the unarmored parts of the enemy soldier. Now, Thorfinn, of course, we follow his actions, right? So we know that he's always aiming for the head, for the neck, and whatnot. But I was talking about the other people, and I'm glad to see that they actually got this right as well. So my mistake, which I will gladly apologize for. Alright, and let's talk a little bit more about the history of the situation, right? So, it was mentioned here, okay, so okay, first of all, another thing that I really like about this episode is in regards to the language differences here, right? Although I do say it's kind of confusing when they're all talking in Japanese at the same time, and we're supposed to, we're supposed to get that they cannot communicate with each other. That seems kind of weird, but all right, fine. But again, if they really were talking to each other, I would have like flipped my shit. Okay, so yeah, at least nothing egregious happened there as well. So that's a good thing. So, anyways, in regards to the English granny, talking about the former king and the current king, right? So the former king that she was talking about is most likely King Edgar the Peaceful, who, as she said, is two kings ago from this current king, Ethelred. Ethelred. So, King Edgar the Peaceful. Again, not okay. So there's not. I don't think there's really much historical sources in regards to him. I don't actually know that king particularly well as well. I do know that he's called the Peaceful because there was relatively little in terms of warfare or neither either in infighting between nobles of the country of England or invasions from the Norse as well. So that's why he got his nickname, the Peaceful, if you will. Beyond that, honestly, I don't really know much about him. Although I have heard some or read some sources which say that he's also responsible for the weakening of England's defenses against the Norse. And okay, so maybe we can talk about this a little bit, right? So, within the 9th century, England actually developed a sort of system, I believe under King Alfred, called the Burgol Hidage. The Burgol Hidage. So it's basically a series of fortifications along southern England, if you will, and basically you can view them as sort of standing garrisons, basically. So they would each be, there would basically be fortresses or whatnot, and they would be garrisoned by a certain amount of troops. And because they were strategically placed within within a certain distance from each other, it forms sort of like this defensive matrix that would be able to rapidly respond to any invasion on the mainland. So that was devised by King Alfred, and that was about 150-200 years ago. And I have read some sources that said King Edgar was actually one of the reasons why this defensive mechanism actually gradually fell out of place due to his own policies of reforming administration functions and whatnot, basically reorganizing the entire kingdom, yada yada yada. And so this defensive system actually fell out of use, and that was what contributed to the increased vulnerability of the English lands to the Norse or Viking invasions. Is that true or not? Honestly, right now, I'm not about to go on like a deep history research project just for the purpose of this. I'm just telling you what I have read sometimes before. Which, of course, generally are also by authors of certain historical backgrounds as well. But as with all things, you need to double verify, triple verify, just to ensure it's just not one person's opinion, right? But anyways, so that was in that part, and then I guess we can talk a little bit about the current king, right? King Ethelred. So his nickname is also pretty interesting, King Ethelred the Unready. And the unready is not the English term, the modern word, unready that we know of. So the unready, at least in Old English, I believe, it meant something like he ill-advised. So basically, it's saying that he was ill-advised. He did not have, I guess you could say maybe he didn't have very good advisors, or his actions were ill-advised, to say the least. Now, again, because he's on the losing side of history, honestly, not much, again, is known about him as well. For me, I know about him mostly that, so he basically was quite erratic in his decisions, if you will. So he paid a lot of tribute money to the invading Viking forces. I believe it's called Dangild. Dangild. It's basically a sort of ransom money. So you pay off to the invaders so that they don't ransack your villages, your towns, etc., etc. So even though he adopted this policy of paying off these invaders, then he decided to go and do the St. Brice's Day massacre, right? The event that we saw, I believe, a few episodes ago, basically the catalyst to this current invasion of England by Sweyn Forkbeard. So just, you know, if you're already paying them to not let them invade, that obviously means that you think you don't have the capability to fight them off, right? So why immediately go around and then piss them off again? Just by that itself should let you know how erratic this guy is. So maybe his nickname of ill-advised does really suit him, if you will. But anyways, so that is in regards to that, and looking at the current timeline as well as the historical context and whatnot, it seems that we are nearing the end of the invasions of early 11th century of England, and probably a few years later it's going to be Sweyn Forkbeard that's going to be actually leading an invasion army directly into England, where he will basically conquer all of England, not quite, but which will be finished by his son Canute the Great. And I'm not sure if we're still going to have some more time in between, or are we going to get to a time skip again? Because I believe from the last that we knew to the time skip now, 2 years has passed since then. So potentially maybe passing another 2, 4, 5 years, and then we get to Sweyn Forkbeard's invasion of England, which would be fun times. Alright, so all that historical stuff aside, I guess we should talk a little bit about this episode in particular, right? And the characters. And yeah, Thorfinn, you know, it's definitely a sad situation where a child as young as he is needs to be on the battlefield and killing people, right? So no child should be subject to that kind of fate. Now, I was harsh on him for his father's death and whatnot, maybe a little bit too harsh, but that part I really had no sympathy. Here, though, yeah, this time he really doesn't know what he's getting himself into. So, you know, being a nuisance is one thing. Actually being thrown into the battlefield, that's another thing entirely, and that is indeed brutal. But like I said, he's made his choice. He's doing this. He's on it, and well, this is the path he's chosen. Right, the beginning of his journey. I will say, however, I was kind of hoping for more interaction between Askeladd and Thorfinn, right? Like, what exactly happened through these years where he's now actually willing to listen to orders by Askeladd, right? Like, their dynamic, it's so interesting, right? He wants Askeladd's head, but at the same time, I do think that perhaps Askeladd is actually teaching him in some other stuff, and, you know, so on and so forth, right? At the very least, he views him as a pretty competent scout and maybe able to hold his own as a fighter already. Whether or not they actually have even more interactions and whatnot, whether Askeladd actually is actually being maybe a little bit soft on Thorfinn and you know, guiding him in a sense of way, maybe in a very harsh way, but still guiding him nonetheless. I would have liked if we could see some more of that part, which hopefully we will see a bit more in the future as well. So yeah, I think that about covers that for this episode. What else is there to talk about? Did I miss anything? The Vikings, the raids and whatnot. No, I don't think specifically I want to talk about anything more. You know, I guess some might want to comment on how brutal Askeladd and his men are and whatnot, but honestly, that's what they do, right? That's exactly what a Viking raid entails. You know, they kill all the men and they take all the loot, they take all the women, or in some cases maybe they accept ransom and then they'll leave your village alone. Well, that's basically what a Viking raid is. So, no surprises there. And yeah, that's just the life that Thorfinn is going to have to learn to live with, right? So, anyways, that's been episode 6. I will see you guys next week as well. Definitely shaping on to be pretty good and quite historically accurate as well. Although, okay, I guess one thing that I did kind of call out that definitely is not historically accurate would be, you know, a sort of midget soldier carrying 2 short knives. I believe they're called, what are they called again? The saw? Sui? You know, they have a specific name for a short sword in Norse, but I kind of forgot what it was called right now. But basically, yeah, again, I can chalk this up to artistic license, right? Similar to how Force is so ridiculously overpowered where he can one-punch even armed opponents into submission. But like I said, artistic license, not really realistic or whatnot, but hey, it adds to the entertainment value of the show. So I'm not going to rag on that too much. So anyways, that's been episode 6 of Vinland Saga. I will see you guys next time.